NuPhy has been on a tight release schedule for the last several months, releasing a V2 of the Air series, starting with the Air75 V2 in the fall of 2023, then the Air60 and the Air96 V2, and now they are back with the V2 updates for the Halo series. In this video, we're taking a look at the Halo75 V2 to see if the improvements are worth an upgrade. Before we dive in, I want to mention that NuPhy sent me the Halo75 V2 for the purpose of reviewing it. I was not paid to make this video, and NuPhy has no input on my review. I do have an affiliate link in the description for you if you're interested in picking up the Halo75 V2 and you'd like to support this channel. It's no secret that I liked the original Halo series. I personally actually bought the Halo 96 myself before I started this channel, and it was one of the first keyboards that I reviewed. At the time, it was one of the best pre-built mechanical keyboards that I had ever used, but of course, it was not totally perfect. The main drawback of the original Halo line here was NuPhy's proprietary customization software, NuPhy Console, which was only available on Windows, and even on Windows, it was a clunky experience. The wireless connections also didn't have the highest polling rates, so they weren't the best for gaming use, but NuPhy has made several changes with the Halo Series V2, and now we've got QMK firmware, we've got higher polling rates, and there's a lot more that's changed here. So let's start with a rundown of the features and specs like we usually do, then we'll talk pros and cons as well as some differences from the original Halo 75. The Halo75 V2 is a 75% layout keyboard with 83 keys and an ANSI layout. It is not currently available in an ISO layout, but more on that later. The construction includes an aluminum top frame and ABS bottom. There are 5 color options available beyond the ionic white and obsidian black. There are now color options for blue, green, and pink. The dimensions are 320 by 135 millimeters with a front height of 21.3 millimeters and a rear height of 32.9 millimeters. The weight is 1,020 grams or 2.24 pounds. There are 2 position fold-out feet for a total of 3 typing angles. Connectivity includes Bluetooth for 3 devices, 2.4 GHz with a 1000 Hz polling rate, and USB-C wired also with 1000 Hz polling. The internal components include a palm plate and hot swappable PCB with a button-style gasket mount. Internal sound control comes in the form of an IXPE switch pad and sound dampening sheet, foam between the PCB and plate, 2 layers of under PCB foam, and a silicone pad in the case bottom. Switch options include 3 NuPhy Gatoron collaborations, including Mint and Raspberry Linear and Lemon Tactile. There is also a silent switch option made by Cherry. The stabilizers are pre-lubed and plate mounted. The keycaps are double-shot PBT in the MSA profile with small shine-through accents on the home keys and up arrow key, and there is an optional set of shine-through keycaps available. Backlighting includes south-facing RGB lighting with 40 different modes. There is also a corner LED indicator light and, of course, the Halo light, which illuminates the case bottom. The battery capacity is 4,000 mAh, and NuPhy estimates 300 hours of use time with all lighting turned off and up to 90 hours of use time with the lighting on, depending on which lights are on and the brightness level. The Halo75 V2 includes QMK firmware with VIA compatibility for customization on Windows, Mac, and Linux. The Halo75 V2 will be shipping from NuPhy starting May 16, 2024, and the price is $129.95 US with the Mint, Raspberry, or Lemon switches, or $139.95 US with the silent switches. All right, let's start getting into pros and cons, and along the way, I'll point out some differences from the original Halo 75, and we'll start with pros. First up, let's talk about this case redesign. While the Halo 75 V2 retains the shape and dimensions of the original Halo 75 for the most part, there are some changes here that take the RGB lighting a step further. If you're looking for RGB that stands out from the competition, you definitely have it here. When we compare the case of the original Halo 75 to the Halo 75 V2, the most notable difference is that bottom half of the case. You still have kind of that scalloped edge design, but you no longer have a thin strip where the Halo lighting shines through. You now have a transparent bottom case, or a translucent bottom case, which allows a lot more of that RGB lighting to come out around the exterior of the case. We still have our corner indicator lights here in the top left corner, but we now also have a Halo series badge in the top right corner that was not there with the original. As far as the layout goes, no changes there. We have the exact same layout with a traditional 75%, no spacing between the main key area, your nav column, and your arrow keys. Now, I'm counting this case redesign in the pros section mainly because of what they did to enhance the RGB lighting here. They didn't take away anything that was good about their case design, but they've enhanced that RGB effect around the outside, which you can turn off if you're not a fan of how much it shines outside of the case. There are also more color options than the original Halo 75. You've now got color options that include blue, green, and pink in addition to white and black. A kind of general pro about the V2 here is that it retains several good things about the original. We still have a premium feel. You've got the aluminum top to the case that gives it a nice premium feel. You've also still got the corner LED that gives you all of the indicators for your connection status and things like that, so they didn't get rid of that. You've got your Windows and Mac OS physical switch here. You've got a hot swap PCB. You've got fold-out feet with 2 positions. So a lot of the good things about the original, they didn't mess around with, which is nice. Now I'm gonna mention the sound, the out-of-the-box sound profile here in the pros, but also something about it in the kind of neutral category between pros and cons. The sound profile is quite different than the original. It is much deeper and poppier. In fact, to me, it sounds a lot more like the Gem 80 with either the Palm, FR4, or polycarbonate plates. So the pro here is that out of the box, there are no objectively bad sounds. There's nothing that requires a modification to fix. However, whether you actually like this difference in the sound profile from the original is very subjective, and we'll talk about that more in kind of that neutral consideration between pros and cons. Continuing with pros though, the switch options are the same as they are in the Gem 80. The switch quality is very good and consistent so far in my experience. I've used a full set of, actually 2 full sets of raspberry switches, a full set of mint switches. The factory lube has been consistent. I'm not finding individual scratchy switches, and also the sound of them, there is no ping. There's none of that like annoying spring ping that sometimes you have. They've been very consistent and the quality is good. Of course, we also now have QMK firmware for easy remapping on Windows, Mac, and Linux, which is a huge improvement over NuPhy console. I had no issue getting VIA to work with the Halo75 V2 after uploading the base file. The polling rates are also improved with 1000 Hz over the wired connection and 2.4 GHz connection. Battery life is also very good and better than the original here. We have an estimate of 300 hours with the lights off and up to 90 hours with the lighting on, depending on how many of the lights are on and what their brightness is. When it comes to the keycaps, this is another one I have kind of a pro to mention as well as something that's more in the neutral space. As far as the pros for the keycaps go, I do think they are very nice quality. They are the exact same keycaps that you will find on the Gem 80 if you purchase them. With the Gem 80, they're not included. You have to add them on. With the Halo series, of course, these are fully pre-built, so they're included. And they are nice quality. They are PBT double shot. The double shot quality is very nice. It's a full double shot, not just a tiny little dab in the top of the keycap. They don't feel super lightweight or super thin. The last pro that I'll mention here is that the new PCB and plate mounting style offers a little more cushion than the original. It still feels firm, more firm than any of the mounting styles really on the Gem 80 except for the screw-in top mount. So it doesn't feel like bouncy or super flexible, but it does feel more cushioned than the original. Definitely less firm than the original. I count that as a pro. I think it's a little bit more comfortable over long typing periods. All right, now let's talk about those kind of neutral category things that fit somewhere between pros and cons. And a lot of this is because they are subjective and some people will count them as a pro and some people will count them as a con. So let's get back to the keycaps here. I like them, and as I mentioned, the quality is very good, but the profile may not be for everyone. It's like a rounded cherry profile with a bigger surface area. It's really down to personal preference as to whether you like this profile and find it both comfortable and efficient to type on. You can always change them if you like. Now, getting back to the sound, the part of this that falls into the neutral space is really just that sound is very subjective. As I mentioned, it's quite different than the original. So if you like the higher pitched, a little bit clackier sound of the original Halo 75, you might not love love the sound of the Halo75 V2 as much. It's very subjective whether you prefer, the sound of the original or the V2. Now, the last thing to mention in this sort of neutral category is the stabilizers. They're still plate mounted, they're still fine, but they're nothing spectacular. I mean, they basically seem like they're the same. Now let's cover a few cons for the Halo75 V2. A couple things having to do with the 2.4 gigahertz connection. One of them is just a minor little thing that not everybody will care about, and one of them is a more significant issue. Okay, so the minor annoyance thing is that the storage slot for the receiver actually isn't the right depth for the receiver. It comes with a little plug covering it now instead of the receiver actually stored in it. And the reason for that is that it doesn't fit in there. It's a little weird now that it's just kind of sticking out. Now, again, not the end of the world, not a huge deal. I just found it a little odd that they didn't adjust this storage slot so that the receiver would fit in it. Now, the second and more significant issue with the 2.4 gigahertz wireless is some bugginess that I encountered. Now, NuPhy did send me the Halo75 V2 prior to it being released and shipped to everybody, so they haven't had a new version of firmware available as of the date that I'm recording this. I've experienced two issues, one of which is consistent with other NuPhy keyboards in the V2 generation that I've had, and that is limited range. When using it at distances of 3 to 4 feet, like you would if you had, your laptop off to the side of your desk or something, I've experienced some pretty unstable connections. However, that is consistent with past second generation NuPhy keyboards I have used, including the Air V2 series. So that really wasn't new, and getting the receiver closer to the keyboard did resolve it. I didn't have an issue from a stability standpoint once I got the receiver within 12 to 18 inches of the keyboard with a totally clear line of sight, then it was fine. The second issue, though, I think does need a firmware update, and that was bugginess, just general bugginess with the 2.4 gigahertz connection during use. The most significant issue I had was that a couple of times while typing, mid-typing something, it would actually go into a loop where it would just keep entering the last key that I pressed over and over and over again until I actually shut the keyboard off completely. Now, NuPhy has released firmware updates for some of their other keyboards, including the Gem 80 and the Air V2 series as recently as May 2024, which they state addresses some freezing issues. However, as I mentioned, I have not been able to update the firmware on the Halo75 V2 because it is not available yet. So that issue with the 2.4 gigahertz connection is a serious one, and hopefully NuPhy gets a firmware update out quickly so that as they start shipping these, if anybody runs into this, the update will be available. Now, another con here that hopefully will come to an end by the end of this year is that the Halo75 V2 is not available in an ISO layout, and neither are any of NuPhy's other keyboards. That has always been a con I've mentioned about NuPhy keyboards. However, in a recent Q&A, NuPhy actually said that an ISO layout is planned for the Halo75 V2 by the end of 2024. So it may finally be happening, just not quite yet. So what does that all add up to? Well, with the exception of my experience with the 2.4 gigahertz connection, in my opinion, it does add up to an overall better keyboard than the original Halo75, which was itself a great pre-built keyboard. Now, the price is $129 with the mint raspberry or lemon switches, or $139 with the silent red switches, which keeps the Halo75 V2 at an interesting spot relative to the competition. It's more expensive than options like the EpoMaker TH80 Pro and Pro V2, or the V1 Max from Keychron, which offers all the same functionality and features, but a little bit of a less premium feel, definitely less interesting lighting, and more understated styling by comparison. It's also much less expensive than the all-metal Keychron Q1 Max, which also offers all the same features and functionality, but an all-aluminum build for a significantly higher price. Especially considering the improvements and the features, the price feels appropriate to me and not a bad value at all. However, the one big question mark here is that buggy 2.4 gigahertz connection. If you're going to rely heavily on that, you probably want to hold out to make sure that a firmware update comes out to resolve that issue. I will pin a comment under this video if that is resolved when a firmware update comes out. But if the 2.4 gigahertz issue is not a deal breaker for you because you're just not planning on using it, and you're looking for a keyboard with unique styling and great RGB lighting, then I can recommend the Halo75 V2. There is also a Halo96 V2 on the way, and presumably at some point a Halo65 V2. So if the 75% layout really just doesn't fit your needs, perhaps one of those layouts could be a better choice. I'll be looking forward to getting both of those in for review, and also to see if that 2.4 gigahertz issue was a one-off or a consistent problem. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of the Halo75 V2. Let me know if you ordered one, and once you get it, how you're liking it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech and Gear channel, and while you're here, wanted to check out one of these other videos. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thanks everybody. See you next time.